episode. Leading off our discussion tonight are Robin Pogrobin, culture reporter for the New York Times, and Kate Kelly, who writes about Wall Street for the New York Times. They are the authors of the new book, The Education of Brett Kavanaugh, an investigation which will be out tomorrow. First of all, let's start with what happened at the New York Times. What happened with that omission that the Times later felt belonged in the piece?
Well, first of all, Lawrence, there was zero intent to mislead anybody about the details of the incident. That excerpt that we ran in the Times was an adaptation of what's in our book that you just described so aptly. It really focuses on the experience of Deborah Ramirez, as we understand it, after Robin spending quite a bit of time with her, why the incident she alleged to have occurred with Kavanaugh hit so hard for her. She was feeling like a fish out of water that first year at Yale to begin with for any number of reasons, socioeconomic, cultural, and so on. And this incident was deeply traumatizing for her. That was the focus of the piece. We included the additional detail about this other as yet unreported allegation because it seemed germane to the type of thing we were talking about. It was a somewhat similar incident.
In your draft of the article, did it include those words that have since been added to the article?
It did.
It did. So somewhere in the editing process, those words were trimmed.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened actually was that, we had her name, and the Times doesn't usually include the name of the victim. And so I think in this case, the editors felt like maybe it was probably better to remove it. And in removing her name, they removed the other reference to the fact that she didn't remember it.
Okay, so the way, in your draft for the Times, you used basically the exact words that are in the book that I deliberately left off the name, because that passage begins with the name.
Yes.
And so in their removal of the name, they ended up removing
the whole
what follows it.
Yes, and I mean, so I think it was just sort of an editing, done in the haste, in the editing process, as you know, for closing the section.
Were you involved in the decision to amend this and do the correction, the addition online to the piece?
We discussed it. Yeah, I mean, we think we felt like there was so much heat. There's so much, everyone has been kind of seizing on various aspects of this that we certainly didn't want this to be an issue anymore. And we certainly never intended to mislead in any way. We wanted to give as full a story as possible.
And the key point here is this was a piece of our book that we were sharing through the Times. And the hope was that people will look at the book, which has a much fuller context, not only about this allegation, about, frankly, which not a whole lot is known. We're sharing what we do know, but also about all the context around these allegations in general, the situation at Yale when Justice Kavanaugh was a student there and Robin was a student there, all the corroboration around the Ramirez account that you spoke of. It's all in there, and we really tried to look at things from a 360-degree perspective.
Let me just do one more point on this amendment in the online version of the article. When they were working on what they were going to add to it and the editor's note that they put in, did anyone consider including the fact that it was in your original draft of the article? That would have been clarifying for people who were wondering how this happened. Did they at any point consider including what you just told us in that editor's note?
I'm not sure if they did or not, honestly, but I think the desire was just to get the information out there to the readers, not to focus too much on the process, because obviously there had been an error of judgment that was being addressed, and just to move on to give people the information they needed, but also to remind people that